So just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. The only person that they can see on camera right now is just me, so no pressure or anything. We're gonna go ahead and get started if everyone wouldn't mind taking their seats. So my name's Isabel, I'm the town planner. And thank you so much for coming to our active transportation meeting. I'm just gonna go ahead and get the text set up here.
Isabel, is this online also? No.
Yep, so as we were just discussing, this is being recorded. We're going to post my presentation to the town's YouTube channel. So just so everyone knows, I am on camera. If you are sort of in these front seats closest to me, you are also on camera, but everyone in the back of the room is not. So we are recording this meeting, the presentation portion of this meeting for folks who couldn't make it tonight. So thank you all for coming. I'm gonna go ahead and ask the comprehensive plan committee members if they might also stand up and just give a wave to those in attendance. Thank you. So again, my name is Isabel. I'm the town planner. I am working with the comprehensive plan committee on the update to our comp plan. And tonight's meeting is specifically focused on active transportation, so human-powered mobility, walking and biking. In terms of what we'll end up covering, sorry about that. In terms of what we'll end up covering, I just want to go through a brief overview of the planning process and next steps. And then we'll go through briefly what we heard from our survey results. We'll go through some data on Orono's existing active transportation system, past local planning efforts, and then Maddie Jensen from BACS is also here to provide some insight and an overview of regional planning efforts throughout their region. We'll then break for a prioritization exercise and then come back together for question and answers. So I would ask that if you have any questions that you hold those until the end. We have plenty of time built into the end of the meeting to answer those questions. So just to give a brief overview of the planning process, where we are is currently in this light blue area. So we started the planning process in April of this year, and then through the spring and summer, we went through a process of reviewing existing conditions. So going through past policy of the 2014 comprehensive plan and then reviewing current data and information related to all of the chapters of the comprehensive plan, which are all actually up on the wall in these posters that you're seeing if you're curious. We kind of provided some highlights of the data there. We're now at the point where we're doing public engagement, so trying to understand better the community's vision for the future and Orono's values. We held an online survey in September and through the end of October and have a project website if you haven't already visited. We held a community open house back in October and also have had some tabling events where I've had sort of direct face-to-face conversations with people at local businesses, at the farmers market, and also students in UMaine student government. And then also this series, so this is the third out of 4 of our topic exploration meeting series. I know I'm seeing some familiar faces from past meetings and we thank you for coming again. And then just so you're aware, how we will end up taking the conversations that we have at these meetings is we'll come up with the community's vision and the values articulated by the people that have actually attended. We'll then go into policymaking where we actually draft the goals and policies of the plan and then come up with some action strategies to meet the vision as articulated by you all through these meetings. And then we anticipate that a final plan will be available for review starting in the fall of 2025. So around September of 2025, we'll have a finalized document with all of this information that we've collected through the past year. As I mentioned, this is the third of 4 of our topic exploration meetings. Our meeting next week is specifically focused on outdoor recreation and natural resources. So if you are interested in providing feedback on what you see as the issues or the opportunities related to those items, we would encourage you to come. That's on next Thursday. And we will also be having pizza salads, snacks, etc. at that meeting if that gets you here. Okay, so just to dive right in, as I mentioned, we had an online survey. We got about 250 responses to that online survey, which ran for 6 weeks in September and October. We asked a variety of questions related to active transportation. Some of them were a little bit more general, and then some were a little bit more specific. So we asked people, how important are a variety of attributes to making Orono a place where you will want to live during the next 10 to 20 years? Folks, about 74% of people said that walkability and pedestrian infrastructure was very important to them. And even 17% about said that that was somewhat important, but 50% of respondents to the survey said that sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure is currently lacking or severely lacking. We also heard that improving bicycle infrastructure was the number 2, so pretty high priority out of 13 ways to most improve quality of life, but 61% of respondents noted that bicycle facilities are currently either lacking or severely lacking in Orono. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, broadly, a community's transportation system is made up of roads, sidewalks, trails, multi-use paths, bicycle facilities, public transit, buses, vans, etc. And then in rural areas without a robust public transit system, private transit like taxi service or rideshare apps also play a pretty significant role in getting people from point A to point B, especially lower income folks for whom owning a car would be cost prohibitive, who still need to make it to appointments, and people who, still need to utilize vehicle travel, which is especially important in rural areas where we don't have a lot of other options. So we're focusing this meeting on active transportation specifically, so limiting that conversation slightly to sidewalks, trails, and multi-use paths, as well as bicycle infrastructure. So this map on the screen here is showing the current location of sidewalks in Orono. As you can see, they're sort of primarily concentrated in the downtown area. They also end up extending outwards towards the apartment complexes up this way, almost to the essentially to the Old Town municipal boundary. They also go up College Avenue to the Old Town municipal boundary, along Forest Avenue, and then out past residential neighborhoods off of Bennett Road to some extent. And then there is a little bit of sidewalk, as you can see here, along the frontage of the University Mall, like where IGA is as well. So as noted, the existing sidewalks are sort of currently fairly limited. One thing that this plan will need to clarify as the town continues to grow is if we expect development to be directed to areas with existing sidewalks and other infrastructure, or if not, if we'll end up expanding that infrastructure and investing in expansions of that infrastructure to other areas where development might be desirable. Okay, so with regards to cycling, there are 2 main DOT designated bicycle routes that pass through Orono. They have a variety of loops that they promote on their website. One of them is the River Loop. That's a 27-mile loop that goes from Bangor to Old Town, up one side of the Penobscot River and down the other, and includes some of the bike paths through the university's campus. And then they also have the Pushaw Loop, which is a 44-mile loop that connects, continuing from Old Town, that circles around Pushaw Lake and through woods and farmlands. It should be noted, though, that perhaps DOT should not be promoting these as fully safe bicycle routes. There are many sections of these loops that are on major roadways that in some cases lack even paved shoulders, so obviously making cycling very difficult. In terms of roads most frequently used for cycling, this data is coming from previous planning efforts, actually done buybacks from the using data that they collected through the Strava app in 2019. So in terms of roads that are most frequently used for cycling, obviously Route 2 is seeing the heaviest amount of bicycle traffic, followed by Bennett Road, College Avenue, and Forest Avenue. I wanted to note here that we do have certain areas of these most frequently used roads that have wider shoulders or areas where it might be safer. We have had significant planning efforts in the past that I'll get into in more detail that sort of give us ideas or ways to strengthen the bicycle infrastructure along those roadways. And that will be especially important because the town has signed a right to operate agreement with Tandem Mobility to do their e-bikes. Yeah, that people can rent like using a phone app. So in the future, we might end up seeing more of those available in Orono. I wanted to talk a little bit about commuting patterns because that is an important aspect of sort of understanding our overall transportation system. So about 18% of Orono residents walk or bike to work, which ends up making the conversation that we're having especially important. This number includes many university students who walk between their apartments and then their jobs on campus or within the community. And just so you know, this data is coming from the US Census Bureau. So they have all of this data around how people are getting to work the majority of the time. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of official data like from the Census Bureau about how people are getting around for reasons other than their commute to work. So, we know that people might be walking more frequently for some of their local trips, but that's not necessarily counted in any sort of official data available. Okay, so this map here is showing the annual average daily traffic through Orono. And as you can see, Main Street experiences pretty significant traffic. I think we all sort of know that. It slows down in the summer and then ramps right back up when students are back. Because you sort of have to go on Main Street to get out to the highway in either direction, or I guess you could go through Stillwater and Old Town. Obviously that's a fairly high trafficked area, making active transportation improvements and infrastructure improvements, at least through that street, specifically important. If you were at our downtown meeting, you've already seen this graphic, but in terms of lessening vehicular traffic, clearly we have less of a sway over users from our other communities that are commuting into Orono and again, utilizing Main Street to get out to the highway and back. So we of course have less of a sway over those folks that are utilizing our regional thoroughfares, but what we can attempt to do is to remove some of our local trips, like commuting for work. About 3,500 people both live and work in Orono. So if we might make it easier for them to commute, we can remove some of the shorter trips on our major roads. And then also for some of our shorter trips, like going to the library, getting a beer or coffee with a friend, going to the grocery store, getting the kids to school, accessing social services. Ideally, those things might be closer to where you actually live. And we can lessen some of the shorter trips that people are taking on our major roadways. So studies have shown that in order for people to choose those kinds of alternative trips, like walking or biking instead of car trips for their daily needs, their destination needs to be within a 15-minute walk, which is about 3/4 of a mile, or a 15-minute bike ride, so about 3 miles of where they're coming from or where they live. Distance isn't the only factor though. I just want to really emphasize that the walk or the bike trip needs to actually feel safe. Nobody's going to choose to take that trip if there isn't the infrastructure that makes those trips possible available. I also just want to note that this is an equity issue. So as you're probably aware, transportation is the second largest cost for people living in the US after housing. We also have a large student population that don't necessarily have cars with them, which I really discovered when I started to talk to people at our tabling events. So students were coming up to me at the farmer's market or when I was at Orono Brewing one night and saying like, I don't have a vehicle to get around. I do all of my daily needs by walking or catching a ride with a friend in some cases or taking the bus. So, the sidewalks not being clear enough for me to walk is actually a huge problem for me. And hearing that face to face from somebody was really important as part of this process. To switch gears a little bit, I want to just emphasize the local planning efforts that have been completed in the past. So over the past 10 years, which was when the last comprehensive plan was adopted, we have done a lot in Orono in terms of pedestrian planning and active transportation planning more broadly. So the previous comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2014, included complete streets initiatives and considered land use and transportation as two parts of the same issue. So they were really interested in, again, going back to that 15-minute graphic, how can we co-locate housing and the daily trips that people need to sort of minimize those shorter trips. They were also interested in providing the infrastructure needed. So those complete streets policies are an effort to make streets more usable for all users of that street. So people walking on the sidewalk, people biking on the street, or even better, in protected bicycle lanes, or people using vehicles on the street. In 2017, we did a downtown traffic and circulation study that was completed by Sebago Technics. And that was sort of, again, focused specifically on this section of Main Street here and the downtown intersections. In 2018, we did a Park Street transportation study, and that was more focused on the area further up Park Street where the newer apartment complexes are. In 2019, as a result of recommendations from the 2014 comprehensive plan, we updated our design standards in our zoning ordinance for the village commercial, which is essentially this area right outside, and the C2 zoning districts, which is essentially that Park Street area up the street, with a focus on pedestrian circulation. So we were trying to make buildings to be slightly closer to the roadway. We were trying to require sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure to be installed in new development projects along that road. A lot of things that might make pedestrian circulation and sort of ducking in and out of businesses a little bit more friendly for people. Between 2017 and 2021, the Bicycle Coalition of Maine and Maine DOT worked on the pedestrian safety action plan. They had a variety of public feedback sessions similar to this one, where they really heard from people, what are the most dangerous intersections in Orono for pedestrians? What are the worst roads to bike on? What roads are you utilizing most frequently? And then they came up with some broad recommendations that the town could implement to sort of address some of those major issues that were identified. Also in 2021, we had the Main Street Safety and Pedestrian Study. This was completed by a consultant team with an advisory committee that was appointed by the town council. And the intent there was to sort of build on that 2017 downtown traffic and circulation study, really come up with pedestrian specific improvements related to sort of Main Street and the surrounding downtown area. Then in 2022, we updated our minimum parking requirements for many residential uses. Those were lowered from much higher than they were before, down to typically 1 or 2 parking spaces. And that was, again, in an effort to sort of encourage taking alternative methods of transportation when possible, and to sort of make our regulations a little bit less car-centric. And then in 2023, the town worked with BACS to adopt a traffic calming policy, which essentially provides sort of a prioritization for addressing complaints related to traffic and pedestrian issues in the community. So they tried to make sure that corridors that were being used most frequently for walking and biking were addressed before any other places. And then in 2024, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, we are working on the Route 2 Transportation Improvements Planning Project, again with a consultant and with funds from the Maine DOT Village Partnership Initiative. They have also done a lot of public feedback sessions similar to this one, where we heard a lot from people about what they actually cared about for the corridor. And I'll show a map of what the study area has been and give a little bit more of an overview. So this here was the study area for Park Street. As you can see, it actually was a fairly long study area. So it went all the way from the intersection of Kelly Road and Route 2, all the way up to the newer apartment complexes, Washburn Drive, Black Bear Lane, all of that. The initial goals of this study was to identify ways to improve safety and accessibility access for all transportation users, address traffic volume issues, especially during the UMaine academic season, address continuity issues of the transportation infrastructure throughout the study area, So if you've ever been sort of walking around and all of a sudden the sidewalk just ends, that was a big thing that they were trying to investigate and address. And then in general, complementing economic development and the historic downtown area. It provided a variety of recommendations to sort of address all of these things for intersections within the project area, which is again along like Route 2, Main Street and Park Street. So just so you're aware of where this project stands and what the status is, I also want to give a little bit more context. So with a lot of transportation planning efforts in general, you are typically looking at a years-long process in order to secure federal grant funding. Transportation infrastructure is extremely expensive. It is usually one of the community's largest expenses. And so we're typically looking at multi-year planning processes. But Maine DOT in the past few years has really tried to focus more on corridor planning and on downtowns throughout the state. So the Village Partnership Initiative was a grant program that they set up and it was available to any downtown on a state or state aid highway, which Maddie will talk about in a few minutes. And it was intended to be for really complex projects that will take several years to develop. It is truly a once in a generation federal and state government investment in Maine downtowns. So typically when you are doing transportation planning efforts, the state requires at minimum a 20% match. For some towns, they're more looking at 30 to 40% match. And so with this project, while it is contingent on securing special federal allocations like grants or earmarks, it would only require the town to do a 10% match. So really significant investment from the state and federal government. I've gotten some questions about this when I've been tabling in recent weeks, so I just want to clarify. We've just completed the first step, which is the public outreach and the planning and the scope. Council has just recently moved forward with the design phase, which will include preliminary engineering work, design, and securing right-of-way. And that, once it begins, will end up being about an 18-month-long process. The grants are available from the federal government for at least the next 3 years. So we're hoping that we will be applying for grant funding and that will be awarded to make this effort actually happen. So first step has been completed, which was the planning work that has been done thus far. But still a little bit of a way to go. Now that we've sort of gotten some of the major local planning projects out of the way, I wanted Maddie Jensen from BACS to come up and just give a little bit of an overview about what is BACS and what the work that they've been doing throughout our region.
Isabel.
Yep. Yeah, that's fine. You can just use the arrows. Yep.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Maddie and I'm a planner with BACS, which stands for the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System. And so we are one of 4 federally designated metropolitan planning organizations in the state of Maine. So really any urban area in the country that has over a certain population gets designated one of these transportation planning organizations. We're one of 4 in the state of Maine. And so our job is to work with the towns, with the public, with the state, with the federal government to coordinate any sort of transportation related project capital funding planning. And so our governing structure includes any of representatives from the member municipalities of our organization, which you can see listed down here. We have 11, one of which, of course, being Orono. And the staff representatives for these towns or communities vote with our organization to make capital decisions and planning decisions. So for a little bit more on our funding, BACS gets roughly $500,000 a year to spend on planning specifically. So to fund our staff time or to fund a consultant to come in and do a planning study that's deemed necessary or useful for the region. And so a little kind of caveat to our funding is that since we're state and federally funded, there is a restriction usually on where we can spend that funding. So like Isabel was mentioning, like state and state aid roads, which are either partially or completely owned and maintained and operated by the state. You can see them, I have them on this map here, the red and green roads. So Route 2, Kelly, Stillwater, Bennick, Forest, and College are really what we can do planning around for Orono specifically. And that's region wide. And And so we use our about $500,000 funding to conduct studies, and we select those every 2 years. So the staff from each of the communities gets together and they put forward project ideas that their town needs or that we need regionally. And then everyone votes and we use our funding to fund those studies. In addition to the planning side of things, we also work with Maine DOT heavily to help coordinate the capital funding that the state spends on the road. So any work that's done on Route 2, for instance, is paid for largely by the state. And we work with them to make sure that they're working with the towns and that it's a coordinated process and we're using funds efficiently. All right, so Isabel just asked me to go through some of the plans that BAX has been working on, or transportation plans in general that are relevant to this conversation. And so the kind of main complete regional plans that we have that are bicycle pedestrian related that we've done in the last 10 years includes the long range pedestrian and bicycle plan, which I believe she has printed out some papers that show what the recommendations from that plan were for Orono, specifically like capital projects. So sidewalk from here to here should be upgraded, or if there's nothing here, we should be addressing that. And that's really important to have a list of project needs so that we can be looking at prioritizing those when we have capital funding to spend. The next one is our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is a long range plan. 2043 is what we're planning for, as Isabel also alluded to. It usually takes a long time to do this sort of work, and so we need to be really forward thinking. And in that Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we looked at the entire system, so roads, bridges, sidewalks, bicycle infrastructure, even like housing and land use, because that's all really necessary to consider the whole picture. And then finally, for a complete regional plan, we have the Penobscot Climate Action Plan, which was just completed this year. And that looks beyond transportation. It included housing, it included conservation, workforce, public health, but specifically transportation was an area that was a huge focus of the plan because it's so interdisciplinary. You need roads to get to work and to get home. You need them for, first responders, and you need them to access, natural areas where you can recreate. And so we really found that a lot of our recommendations were completely around, active transportation or transportation in general, or were somewhat adjacent. And so there's a couple, I think there's some sheets lying around that include some of the recommendations that came out of that plan that are active transportation focused. Nextly, we have some currently underway regional plans that I wanted to talk about. So first, the Better Road Sidewalk Inventory Database. This is really a complement to a database that we've already completed, which is our collector paving. So the surface condition of our roads, we created a database that looks at the condition of state and state aid roads throughout the region and tells us and helps us prioritize which roads we should be investing in when. Because with limited funding, we have to be really strategic about what we're spending our funding on and making sure that it's giving us the biggest bang for our buck. So not only will it spit out a list of highest priority projects for Orono specifically, or for, region wide, but it will also help us understand the useful life of a road. So in kind of road maintenance, useful life terms, a road is typically lasts longer and is you can spend less money on it if you do small improvements more frequently than if you completely leave a road alone for decades. You have to completely reconstruct it, which is significantly more expensive than doing small, kind of upgrade projects. And so this database uses some like engineering and mathematical equations to tell us, okay, if you don't do this small improvement in the next 3 years, in 10 years, you're going to have to completely reconstruct the road, and that's going to be more expensive than doing this small project now. So that for the pavement condition and the sidewalks is what we're working on right now. Next, the Safe Streets and Roads for All. This is a federal grant that we received, which focuses on a concept called Vision Zero, which is the goal that 0 traffic fatalities is achievable, and we should be working towards 0, not just reducing, road fatalities or injuries, but we should be striving towards 0. And so this really doesn't just focus on the infrastructure itself, but also education and enforcement and what we can be doing to make our roads safer for all people. And so this is a 5-year plan that we're gonna be working on, and then once that plan is done, the towns can then go after implementation funds to, you know, do a safety project that was identified in the plan, and the federal government will pay a substantial portion of that project. And then finally, the Complete Streets Guidelines and Policy is one that we're actually just about to start. Complete Streets is another kind of one of those terms that kind of can mean a lot of things, but it's really looking at more of a policy and design approach for making roads safe and usable for all people. So rather than kind of necessarily just building infrastructure, which is a huge part of it, but the policy behind prioritizing roads that are safe for all people, rather than because a lot of times it's not that we don't know that that is important and that is valuable, but there are so many policies and kind of processes that we've used for years to decide how we spend our capital money, and it doesn't always prioritize projects that are good for all users, not just road users. And so this is looking at kind of creating ways to adjust that so that we're actively considering at the beginning of a project rather than tacking on a sidewalk at the end that doesn't connect to anything else. And then other upcoming plans, I'm realizing now that I probably should have called this potential upcoming plans. Again, as Isabel alluded to, there's a lot of funding in transportation right now. And so these are some opportunities that we have coming up that could complement what previous studies have already been done or what we're working on right now. So the Maine DOT Village Partnership Initiative that Orono has been working on, Bangor, Brewer, Old Town, and Hamden are also going through the same process. Orono is the first one done, but Bangor, I just got their draft report last week, so they'll be completing that by the end of this year, and Brewer, Old Town, and Hamden won't be far behind. And so it's really exciting that this region has so many communities going through this process and really considering what they can do to improve their downtowns, because if in, you know, however many years once this process is done, we could have a really connected region. Route 2 specifically has Bangor, Orono, and Old Town on it, and it would be great if we could have some connectivity between all of those downtowns. The EPA Community Change Grant, we've already applied for this and we haven't heard back if we've been awarded it, but if we are, we'll receive about $6 million to do active transportation planning and engineering on some key roads in the region, like Stillwater, like Route 2 outside of the downtown areas, kind of connecting the downtown areas to each other, which is really a substantial amount of money, of course, but also will help us be competitive with others in the state, as more often than not, we've found that if we don't have a project that's shovel ready, we sometimes get passed over and we're not as competitive with other areas of the state that are a little bit more ready and willing to fight for their projects. And so this is really exciting that if we have fully engineered projects just sitting and waiting, then as soon as funding comes along or as soon as Maine DOT is looking for a project to do, we'll have something ready to hand them. Safe streets and roads for all, I mentioned, once the planning process is done, there's a second grant process that the towns can go through to get those projects funded. And finally, this isn't necessarily a project, but it's kind of a shift that we've seen from the Department of Transportation, which is focusing more on corridor planning rather than like spot treatments, not just looking at one intersection, but looking at the entire half a mile length corridor that is really key to connecting all of these dots, rather than just kind of placing great infrastructure in one area, but not considering how it works in the entire system. And so we're working to kind of adapt to their changing priorities so that we have, again, plans that are ready to hand them that show exactly what this region is looking for. We are unified in what we're prioritizing and kind of ready to be competitive in getting that funding. I think that was my slide. Thank you.
I do want to skip ahead a little bit. I think we just threw a lot of information at you. So I will leave it with a quote and then we'll jump into more of a Q&A before we go into the small group conversations that I had planned. So active transportation networks, including bike lanes, sidewalks, and multi-use trails, help create vibrant communities by providing safe, comfortable, convenient, reliable, efficient, and affordable ways for people to get around. Investing in active transportation can drive community cohesion and economic prosperity while helping to ensure people are connected to the outdoors and the essential places they need to go each day. Importantly, active transportation networks provide opportunities for affordable, low emission, or even zero emission trips while closing gaps between people and their next ride. After all, active transportation is an essential part of every public transportation trip. So I'll leave you with that to think about. If you have questions for me or for Maddie, I think we'll take those first, and then we'll go into a prioritization session that I came up with.
Maddie, you mentioned that there is resources there to address enforcement of safety on the road. Can you tell us a little more about what exactly that means in terms of what might be available to us?
Yeah, so the Vision Zero plan looks at not just the infrastructure itself, but education and enforcement. And so that could be, it's really dependent on the town. So each town in this grant that we receive will get their own Vision Zero plan. So it will be individualized to what each town needs. I don't know what Orono is getting, as we're probably 3 to 6 months into the process, but it could be, hey, we have a really bad speeding issue on this road and it's caused multiple crashes. Is there any, not only education for drivers and for pedestrians on how they can protect themselves or protect the folks around them, but also can we have enforcement? Like, it doesn't necessarily even have to be like police, it can be, but it could also be like the speed traffic or the speed digital displays. That's actually been found to be really effective at reducing speeds in some areas. So it'll be different to every town.
Is vehicle or having vehicle crashes, is that the only metric that we use to evaluate effectiveness of these things? Because personally, I think personal terror in trying to cross Main Street in a crosswalk at 6:30 PM in this community is something that we need to measure. And it's really a problem.
You're right. And that's a really big gap that we have, is that when we're looking at data, we only have what's available. And this Maine in general, but this region, I think specifically, really lacks data. And so when you're looking at like the Strava data that we used in our plan to show where people are biking, that's only for people who are opening their phone, logging on and saying, I'm going to bike, here. Yeah, it doesn't show where people are actually biking. It's only the people who are kind of like self identified. And so we really lack the data of people coming to meetings or coming and sharing their like qualitative experiences that can help inform these decisions. We just have to use like crashes and things like that.
Deaths and crashes, that's all we
Yeah,
got.
and then like kind of a range of death, serious injury, minor injury, injury.
Can I extend on his, because that's sort of what I had personal information. You guys are doing big plans. My thought was more, what can the town do with our current resources? So I'll hit on 3 things. One is kind of yours, was the crosswalks. So I forget exactly which one it is, but if you're driving south and then you encounter one of those crosswalks, maybe just beyond the old bank. Okay, so for a while, they had that sign in the middle of the road. So then you're looking at that. You're looking at cars parked on each other side. You're afraid of somebody stepping out. So as a driver, there's just too much confusion at that point. Possible solution, block off the parking further beyond the crosswalk on both sides. That way, visually as a driver, you're not assessing as much when you're looking at that.
I'm talking about being in the crosswalk.
Well, no, but I'm
having the cars continue to go by me.
Okay, I'm not doing that. I'm trying to be the safe driver, not waiting for somebody to jump into the crosswalk. In that instance, okay, now
I don't jump.
well, but maybe you don't, but you know what I mean.
I know what you're.
Now flip it the other side. I'm a reformed marathon runner, so I run 30 miles a week or so here in town now. I was doing one of my runs on Bennick Road, and I was very close to the nursing home, and I observed a lady who lived on the nursing home side, and her mailbox is on the other side. So this nice little old lady, she had a stop, look left, look right. And there's a big cresting roads on each side and carefully made her way across and back. I think she was posting a letter into her mailbox, but I mean, and that's a real concern because of all the speeds. You know, the joking solution would be, okay, everybody has to do that. They each get a crosswalk so they can get to their mailbox. That's a semi absurd, but I mean, you're talking 0 fatalities. I mean, okay, that's the absurd one. Now, one that, and this was a survey I did tonight. I drove in my car and parked at each place. I went on College Avenue from the corner of Park Street all the way up to the Old Town line. And I've written them down and I'll get a list to somebody. I found 11 poles with traffic, with the streetlights out. 11. And this is over the years, this happens, where the poles the lights are just out and nobody's maintaining them. Who could catch that? Maybe once a week, the officers that are patrolling at night might note down the poles. You know, somebody working at night has got to capture that information. But, and specifically, and this is what got me onto this one, I was driving southward on College Avenue the other night by the steam plant parking lot. And in my list, there are 3 streetlights out by the steam plant parking lot. And students and staff are encouraged to park there because it's, quote, only a quarter of a mile from the center of campus. And I had somebody in dark, not on a crosswalk. Thankfully, I didn't run them over, but in the other lane as I'm going south, and I zipped by him. I was like, there's somebody right there that wasn't in a crosswalk, but then again, it was also where there wasn't a light working. So that's my piece.
Yeah, no, I mean, you raised multiple really good points of not just I mean, so regional plans are what I was talking about, but the corridor kind of planning that I was talking about, kind of becoming more of a priority is to look at some more details like that. We have a corridor plan right now to do Brewer South Main, which is like kind of a quarter mile, half mile section, looking at every piece, every intersection, every potential crossing, every driveway, to kind of get more to the details of that, because that is important and something we can't do at a, 11 community-wide level, but.
Yeah, but the sad thing is that you have to, the post office won't put mailboxes on both sides of the road. If that could get changed, that would help resolve that particular issue, but.
Yeah, in terms of the local level, this has been a conversation, especially the Main Street crosswalks. I mean, in every plan since at least the last 10 years, but I'm sure longer than that.
But the streetlight issue has been going on for 20 years.
Yeah, and that's a good one, because when we consider the transportation system, right, like I alluded to, you have to have the infrastructure, but you also have to kind of feel safe. Like, I'm not gonna make that walk if I don't feel safe doing that walk, whether that's in terms of lighting or infrastructure or what have you. So I think that's a great point. I saw your hand first and then I'll jump over here.
Yeah, these are like great ideas. And I think we'd all throw out a lot of like ideas out there for ways we can improve things today with not too much. My question is actually, you meant about the Route 2 planning thing, and maybe this isn't the right form and I'm a little confused, but like you mentioned that it's, moved from a sort of planning phase to a design phase, and which by last time I saw those plans, like they hadn't done the sort of like getting local information, and was more like a one size fits all coming from outside. And I'm pretty sure, it's pretty clear that they're meant on vehicle traffic movement, and if implemented would make pedestrians less safe. Like that's pretty clear. And like I really hope they don't go forward as the last plan I saw was. So my question is like, how did like this is purpose is to create more pedestrian safety, and that seems to be the last I saw going the other direction. And like, is there coming together of these things and more time for these sort of like real on the ground, like looking at sensible ideas that will make Orono better?
So the planning phase is sort of over. They considered a variety of alternatives for each of the intersections. So that was sort of where we are now, is that we've sort of gotten to the point where we have had these kind of meetings for that. We've gotten to a point where there's been alternatives considered mainly by the council, but also by the public, and then they sort of took that information and chose alternatives based on what they
So
heard.
you're saying like the like roundabouts of like the things in that plan, like that is, there's no more room for like working on.
Caveat is that the next phase is sort of the engineering piece, when we actually have to get into the details of that. And so, you know, I would assume at that point, there's more opportunity for conversation if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, it seems crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the one on Park Street's a horror show of the pedestrian.
Yeah, I mean, right, rotaries are difficult, yeah.
Can I offer a clarification
No.
that the drawings you've seen at this point are concepts, they are not plans.
Yeah.
They are concepts, they are a visualization
Well,
of
they-
the
they
ideas
don't-
that the committee brought to the planning process. It's a visualization of those ideas, that it's not a plan, it's a concept.
There wasn't a lot.
That's an
of work
important distinction.
Dropping like out of the box ideas to go.
I'm sorry.
I feel like there's more room for more workshopping of other ways. to
Absolutely, absolutely.
Make Orono better, and if we're in here trying to make Orono better and there's some path that those are fixed in some way, I hope they're not, I guess.
And you use the term one plan fits all. That is not what's going on here at all. The DOT is making a tremendous effort to not do that anymore. They tell us that they have learned their lesson and that they are coming to the communities to develop concepts and do this whole community planning process to avoid exactly what you're talking about when you say one plan fits all. That's not what's happening.
And to add on that, my understanding too was that this is now, we needed to get the ball rolling,
Yeah.
So that
to
we
get
get
the
in the
money
queue.
spent, right?
but your concerns and everyone else's concerns as far as the actual final design, there's a lot of work to do in order to get to that point
Yeah,
still.
so that's what I just wanna make sure that.
We talked about that part being alone an 18-month process once it begins, so yeah.
I'll put a plug in, please, like when there are workshops and public meetings, please come to them, because I've hosted them before where we are asking people to come and give us their personal experiences. Like, I wish I could go to door and say, hey, you're on this study, please tell us what's wrong with this area, but this is the most people I've ever seen at a public meeting. So
Glad you're here.
yeah, the 10% plan, you know, the engineering is the next 90% that we need to do, but we need people to tell us what's wrong with the plan, otherwise it's gonna be just whatever the engineers.
And they did do,
Sidewalks.
yeah, and they did do multiple workshops over the summer, so for what that's worth.
I would just note that a lot of faculty and like people with kids vacation over the summer.
Yeah.
And so maybe try to have some of those workshops,
I mean,
not during the
Plan
summer.
included using the school non-starter kind of. That's what.
We yanked that out too, so I mean, we took the school board,
I know, but
and-
it's like, come on.
we're gonna have focus groups, we're gonna have a right of way, Route 2 right of way working group for people who live within the right of way or own property in the right of way, so it's gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's gonna
so
happen.
That's good.
Yeah.
I just.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we still ultimately get to decide before we invest for the final to go ahead with the project.
Thank you for doing it. I don't mean to be like.
Oh, I know.
I know you guys have put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
Ask my question. The slide you had about commuting and the census, do you have any comparison data to where Maine is percentage wise? I mean, not Maine is, Orono is percentage wise, you know, compared to Maine or other college towns, or where we sort of fit in that?
I have at least Maine data, yeah, so Maine statewide is at about 19%, so slightly above where we are. Our biking score is not score, but percentage is fairly low compared to the rest of the state. They're hovering at about more like 2%, we're at 0.5, so
Oh, yeah.
for what that's
Well, I
worth.
said intersection.
I would have thought if we were higher.
Yeah, so at the time of the last plan in 2014, this is actually just an interesting data point. We were higher than the state by a couple percentage points. We're actually now slightly lower than the rest of the state by a couple percentage points.
Well, perhaps that is indicative of people feeling safe. Safe, yeah.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
because the opportunity is certainly there.
Yeah.
To walk or bike.
So I see a lot of the plans for improving bike access and sidewalks that are along roads, Route 2 and other spots, which is needed because that's the majority of the way people are gonna move around, even if they're walking or biking with that. But are there plans to try to come up with trails or other ways to get people off of the roads completely? I think the safest way to make bikers and walkers safe is just not have them near roads. So I know, like, for example, there are some informal trails like Westwood, Spencer, kind of behind there that people could use to like walk to school, which is great. But it's a very, not a clear, like formal sort of thing. So I don't know if there's ways that the town has looked at trying to come up with corridors for people to move around where cars aren't even a factor.
Yeah, that was a significant conversation in some of their more recent planning efforts, mainly with regard to, like Kelly Road and Main Street intersection, sort of as you're coming up this way, that was a pretty significant conversation. The problem with that is if the town doesn't already own it or the state doesn't already own it, it tends to become very expensive very quickly with the right of way work that's required, like the land purchases. But yeah, that has been a significant conversation in the past. I believe it was mainly, I'm just gonna jump back to my slide. I believe it was mainly discussed in the Park Street transportation study and then the Main Street safety and pedestrian study from 2021, if you were curious about like what specific recommendations. Any other questions for me or for Maddie at this point?
On that last comment, there is, I didn't realize it was on the list of identified projects, but there is actually on here, there was 3,500,000 to build that trail from Kelly to Westwood, so the planning's been done for that, or not the planning, but
The concept, the
Concept.
conversations have been had for that. The engineering or anything else has not been had for that, but we can at least ballpark a number
Okay.
based on what we understand. Yeah.
I actually have a follow-up question on that. And the reason that was so expensive is because, as I gather, we were told that to make this something that you could signpost us like, this is a, back way to school, then it was going to have to be ambulance accessible, it was going to have to be paved, it was going to have to be lit up, makes it very expensive. Also, absolutely ruins the character of the woods that I bike through all the time, and other people walk and do their dogs, walk their dogs and walk themselves. And so my question is that strictly necessary? Our town manager has changed. I don't know whether that makes a difference, whether that was to do with who was in charge at that time. Is it really necessary to make it such a hard structure? Or could we not have trails that had just got little signs up that will get you to school? Little green blobs, little maroon blobs with pictures of rails on.
I will say I don't necessarily want to speak out of turn because I think our emergency response team might have a problem with me speaking out of turn. But yeah, to your point, like, of course, the sort of what I think of as the pinnacle trail system in Old Town that really connects a lot of the major residential areas to the rear of their elementary school is exactly that, fully accessible to ambulances, at least gravel minimally in most parts. So I think the emergency responder answer that they would want me to say is yes, correct.
And the insurance companies.
Yes.
Don't forget the insurance. They control a lot of what we do in our lives.
Also funding, if it's funded by the feds, it has to be ADA accessible,
Right,
which means it has to be in level, and
yeah.
that also, lots of factors, unfortunately.
Is this the place and time to like present new ideas for? future planning efforts?
So we've had a lot of conversation in the past. If it's not something that's already sort of on the list, I'm certainly happy to take new ideas. We have, what we've been doing at our other meetings is more of a very broad overarching vision. I didn't think that that was appropriate for this meeting because I think a lot of you have already given considerable numbers of your time to past planning efforts. So what the exercise we're going to do is a prioritization exercise of what we've already heard from you folks. But if you have a new idea, I am certainly happy to hear you out.
Right now?
Sure.
So Forest Avenue, I pedestrianize it every day. I noticed on the maps that the sidewalks end at the access points to the woodland trails, which is great. I pedestrianize it beyond that, over the I-95 corridor, et cetera, where the safety levels just drop precipitously. And I understand that the 95 corridor is like kind of an exception to planning rules because of the fact that it's a bridge and complicates things and makes it much more expensive. But in terms of low-hanging fruit, sort of on theme with what this man was talking about, I feel like at the very minimum, there could be additional signage out to the roundabout with Stillwater, to the effect of pedestrians are here, you know, beware for bicyclists, walkers. I do on a daily basis see people walking their dogs, running, and other bicyclists. There are trails that are fairly heavily used out by the dump that people use Forest Avenue to access. So I think there's enough use and therefore reason to.
And I'd run on that route more, except that the hill on Bennick Road, not Bennick Road, on Stillwater Avenue, the real steep hill past 395, the shoulders are non-existent and it's wicked dangerous to run up that.
I think that'd be the next level of fruit to pluck.
Yeah.
Expanding the shoulders, you know.
Yeah, I
paving
mean,
just the
that was
shoulders.
just a crisis level,
Yeah.
like no shoulder.
And then like
area.
also just in terms of the ways in which the roads are plowed. Like go out right now and you could see how the shoulders are even lessened. What there are of shoulders are like non-existent at this point because they're covered in ice. And so I'm, you know, literally biking and or walking in the road itself. Which is, I understand it's a choice. However, it's just really dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's like a way to be like, hey, when you plow forest, I don't know, should the angle of the plow such that all of the snow is plowed off of the pavable surface.
Like making sure at least the shoulders where we have them are paved for use.
Or like where the shoulders and plants start, that's where the snow goes, not, it doesn't remain on the pavement.
And also just being cognizant of plowing sidewalks, like the way that the sidewalks are plowed sometimes, it's just really hard to navigate without kind of going into the road if you don't want to like slip and fall on ice.
Is it the order in which they're being plowed or the way in which they're being
The
plowed?
way in which they're being
Okay.
plowed.
I did hear that a lot.
One of the big issues is they never cut through to where you're gonna cross the road, so there's a crossing, but you have to climb over a mountain of ice and then slide into the road
And if you have
to be
two
able to get
kids-
across.
Yeah, and that's not easy with two kids.
And part of it, I think too, is that pedestrians get on the snow before it gets plowed, so that makes it icier I mean, it's a vicious circle.
And the order can be bad too. Sometimes the sidewalks will be clear and then a big municipal truck will come down one more time and everything comes from the road and it's kind of sprayed onto the sidewalk. And now it's left to harden and clump up.
Sorry, I'm just taking notes, but go ahead.
Got a couple ideas. So dude, like, well, I think every crosswalk should be a raised crosswalk with like, I mean, like a raised structure with a speed bump with the crosswalk on it, like other college towns do with flashers on it and signage. I mean, and to make people slow down. I don't know if the like my crazy town green idea made it into any of these things.
thought that was a great idea.
Behind the post office thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that idea.
So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's in circulation.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know how many people have seen it or heard it, but it's Noah's Way, I think is what we're gonna call it, or Noah's Ark, or we'll call it something like that.
I think it's really obvious that people don't feel safe. You know, I mean, whether it's the sidewalks, I mean, I have a beef about, I'm over it, about reducing the number of employees that plow and the trucks out on the road and all that, but it's just under everything everybody is saying is that they do not feel safe, which is a significant issue, I think. I don't know, like, to me, it's a bigger issue than adding a sidewalk somewhere, you know?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right, like, I think that's a really important point to make because you can sidewalks, we can build new sidewalks, but
Right.
if they're not being maintained, that's not actually helpful to anyone. So, where should we be prioritizing funds? Is it sort of on major maintenance and staffing to help with that maintenance? Is it new sidewalks? Is it, what does that look like for the future? As we're kind of having these prioritization.
As we're going into winter, we're talking winter things, but there's a lot of unsafe things in the summer.
Mhm.
I mean, one of you had made the comment about some e-bike contract or something. To me, those are the most dangerous things on the road because traditional cyclists have a certain ethos and respect. But all these new electric things that are out there, the electric skateboards, the electric things, various weird electric things that are people on, they're just going down the middle of the road and you don't know if they're supposed to be with traffic or against traffic. I mean, I've seen skateboards down the middle of College Avenue. And it's just crazy.
I'd rather have them on skateboards though, than driving another vehicle, another car or truck. And so just to be the other side of that argument, every single one of those
But in the
people,
middle of the road?
I'd rather
middle
have
of the
someone
sidewalk.
driving.
It's not either cleared or paved or bumpy or dirty or whatever.
But with
Off to
no,
the side, it's the same with riding a road bike. You need to be in the road if it's not well cleared or safe on the edge.
You mean the middle of the lane or the
yes, in the
middle?
middle of the lane.
Yeah, that's where where someone might have to be, because the side of the road has junk on it. or
When
it's not safe.
when did the toy called the skateboard become a mode of transportation? I mean, that's a serious question.
They're all
It
considered
is.
micromobility in a formal sense.
Or suicide.
Skateboards, bikes, rollerblades, micromobility is this to scooters. And the idea with micromobility is to get people out of a single occupancy vehicle and onto something smaller that's human sized and safer if they were to hit a pedestrian than hitting them with a big car or a light duty truck.
Along those lines, though, making sure there's enforcement, so the e-bike's not going 30 down the sidewalk, which I had to jump out of the sidewalk multiple times last year, because there was this one particular person who like always with their headphones on, like looking at their phone on their e-bike going 30 miles an hour down the sidewalk, like almost ran us over like probably 10 times.
Education is a component of it, and with tandem mobility, which is the e-bike contractor, they're gonna have regular bikes as well, from what I understand. Education is gonna be available to customers, and they would incentivize the education in order to get a discount with the renting the units.
And I've been driving and my car was hit by somebody with a bicycle with one of those sort of I wanna say a chainsaw motor or something, some small motor tacked to it.
Yeah,
And the guy hit me.
those are illegal to use on the roadway.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely
This
not
guy was
legal.
going to see his parole officer.
Yeah,
in Bangor.
and there's always gonna be these cases where it's really difficult to reach the individual.
Sorry to interrupt. We've had a couple of people with their hands up. I'll go to you first.
Yeah, so, okay, one thing I'm thinking about, I've got two quick things, I'm trying to be concise, but, I think expanding infrastructure is great, but making the infrastructure that we have better is also important. So we talked a little bit about crosswalks or lack of blinking lights. I got hit in a crosswalk in October.
Yeah.
I haven't ran since.
Yeah.
So it's been a huge bummer. Like my ribs still hurt, my shoulder's messed up, I can't really move like I normally do. I'm not a reformed marathon runner. I had plans to run an ultra marathon, a marathon this winter. Not happening now, because I got hit by the UCU trying to cross the street towards whatever that side street
Oh, God.
near Marsh Island is, which, by the way, had multiple friends get hit there on bikes or otherwise.
Mhm.
Horribly dangerous. Something needs to be done about that intersection, terrible. So expanding infrastructure is great, but since I've lived in Orono, which has been about 3 years now, a lot of the lights to, get the right of way to let drivers know that you're trying to cross, they don't work reliably. So let's improve that, first of all, right? Second of all, in addition to just like, needing to improve what we already have, does the town have any pull over the university? Enrollment's increasing. Freshmen can have cars. Where I went to school, that wasn't a thing. Right? So I don't know, and maybe I'm misinformed, maybe I don't know what the whole story is, but it seems like the university tries to get students to come here. Like one of the things that they used to sell the university is that freshmen can have cars. I teach high schoolers. No offense, they're great. They're not good at driving. Freshmen are not that much older or quite frankly, more responsible than my high school students. So does the town have any plans to deal with increased traffic? And Eric was talking about preferring to have people on skateboards than cars, which sure, less cars is great. But does the town have like any kind of like plan moving forward to deal with increased enrollment, increased cars on the road? And just more congestion in streets? Like, what are we doing?
Like, are you asking in terms of the university specifically, if we have some sort of like sway over?
Yeah, like
Like
if
that
enrollment's
policy?
gonna keep increasing, can we like do anything to maybe limit the number of undergraduates that can have cars? Because, I mean, first of all, like it's an issue, it's a safety issue for pedestrians, cyclists, runners, et cetera, whatever. But also, even if you're just trying to drive around town, like you're gonna be like, I don't think that we have infrastructure for drivers to like facilitate like a smooth flow of traffic if we keep having more cars on the road because there's more people at the university.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of like actual like legal power to say, no, you cannot have any more cars, no, unfortunately, not really. It would be sort of a partnership conversation and a relationship building conversation, which I know,
It's just, there's only so much space.
yeah.
And I think it's kind of ridiculous that anyone can have a car. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and it was the same way when I was in college. I totally appreciate, yeah.
Laura was
I'm-
waiting.
Oh, sorry. I'll go to Laura first, sorry.
I guess when you were sharing the percentage of people and you said the statewide numbers are actually higher for walkers or bikers.
Yep.
Like, I find that either very concerning or like shocking because the pedestrian infrastructure in theory in this town is like 1,000,000 times better than many other communities. And so, yeah, like either our safety is in a dire situation, so people aren't using it, or we've created a community that is completely built on commuters coming in from kind of far away. And that speaks to our housing. And so like one or the other, we're in trouble. And the amount of traffic that we do have like on those major corridors is crazy, whether it's students or people commuting, I don't even know. But like, how is Orono lower than the state? Like that should be a key question because there are a lot of sidewalks, like compared to any other community or in the Bangor area. So why are people not using them?
Yeah, yes, I think that's an important point. And then the commuting point. So, you know, this is just to be clear, this slide is only showing like Orono residents commuting patterns, but the number of people who both live and work in Orono has gone down since the 2014 plan and has gone down significantly since like the early 2000s. We are having much more commuters coming into our community now than we did previously. And
So
apparently
that
more
seems
people going
part of
out.
the fix to all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions or comments for the good of the group? I want to switch into our prioritization exercise. Again,